So we're going to talk about the head again, because it's a big, big subject, as we know. And we need to break it down. Now, the head is made up of, as we found here, no surprise, two massive structures, the skull and then the face. The skull is this rounder shape. This face is this more mask shape. And they can be treated together or separate in all sorts of fun ways. And so we break it in, we take those two structures, two big structures, and I always like to start with the big and simple stuff. And then we're going to, when we get control of that, the ideas around those big simple things, the big skull, the big mask of the face, then we can move into smaller and sometimes more complex things. So I always move from big and simple, foundational information, down to small and more potentially complex, although I want to try and make everything simple if I can. But it's more detailed. So just being smaller sometimes makes it more complex. Big and simple, small and complex. I want to not draw the head, I want to draw my idea about the head. And one of the big ideas we had that we talked about in the last couple lessons was LTL. We talked about making these big simple shapes one way or another. And there's lots of wonderful ways to make it. And you can experiment with those, and we did a little bit. And then if we can map out the LTL, now we've got this primarily two-dimensional idea, and we can start to move it pretty effortlessly without understanding linear perspective towards the three-dimensional. So from two-dimensional shape, which is fine. You can do world-class work just doing two-dimensional shapes. But if you want to get more realism, more structure, then we want to move it towards a three-dimensional form. That can be difficult. And what that really means when we move to a three-dimensional form, we have to show the audience, when they look at my piece of flat paper or my stretch of flat canvas, they have to be able to know how to move up and down, and over. That's different than just around. If I go up, down, and around, that's a silhouette, that's a shadow on the wall. But if I go over, now I'm moving over the volume and feeling that three-dimensional position and starting to get the idea, if not the illusion yet, of things going into the picture plane and not just sitting flat to the picture plane. Really critical moment. And so if we can't get that idea in the very beginning, simply, then when we do all of our beautiful rendering and add all those incredible details and nuances and put hundreds of hours into it sometimes, it's all going to fall apart. It's not going to happen for us. So we've got to add all that extra stuff, the small and complex I would add to all the rendering, all the blending and the smudging and the erasing and all that kind of stuff to get not just the idea, but the illusion of form. If we can do that simply and systematically by understanding that we need to get the audience not just to move around, but to move over the form, then they're going to feel the volume, the character, and the three-dimensional position of things. And so we use the LTL to take something that's very complicated, the head with all the features, and break it down. And that brings up another point. It's the head with all the features. The eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. All those features. Those are smaller and they are more complex. They're tough. But we're not going to get those heads right if we don't get a landscape of the big structures, the skull and the face, the landscape of that, so that we can place the topography of those ball in the hole, like the eyes, the wedge, the barrel shape, and so on. So the features aren't going to be believable if there's not a structure to hold them. And so oftentimes what happens is we just do a simplified head, and then we get the simplified features, and it kind of looks right. But as we start working with it, we don't know how to make it more and more sophisticated, make it more and more believable. So we're going to do a little bit of work on that head. We're going to take the mask of the face and the skull, not very much work at all on the skull, mostly on the mask of the face, because that's where most of the features lie. And where the mask of the face meets the skull, that's where the ear lies. So we'll work on the topography, the landscaping of the mask of the face here today, and probably the next day too, next week, and really sculpt that out. We're going to start with the forehead and the cheeks. And if we can figure out what those are doing, we're going to start to take step by step a clearer feel for the whole head. It's going to be more sophisticated, more realistic, get the idea of a real head down very quickly or convincingly. And then when we do put those features in, things work together. So if you look at the great master portrait artists, let's say, since we're talking the head, like Sargent's and Van Dyck's and those folks, Velázquez, they do this magnificent job of structuring the major chunks, major landscape features of the whole mask of the face first, and then the features, the eyes and the rest go on top of that. So that's what we're going to start to do. So we'll just leave that there for a second. So if we look at this guy, we'll see something very interesting. If I just track, let me do this. If I just track, here's the forehead. Oh, I can do this. There we go. The cheekbones are wider because this is this armature. It's a flying buttress that you'd see in like a Cathedral of Notre Dame. It's a structure to support and hang the muscles off, attach the muscles. It's a structure to build out, to buttress and protect the eye, which is, you're not going to survive in the wild if you don't have your eyes. So we have this armored plate going around, and it pushes out in front, pushes out the side to protect. So the cheeks get wider, right about at the eye line or where the ears attach more or less. That's going to be the widest part of the face. And then it's going to get a little more narrow at the forehead. So we want to look at those. Here's the skeleton with a little bit of, let me pull back so it's not so distorted, with a little bit of musculature on it, the crochet. And again, you can see how the forehead, the temple is more narrow, and then I push out wider for the cheeks. And then it's going to go down narrower again to the chin and jaw. We'll look at that later. And no matter how subtle that head is, although it can vary in type, just going to get this square when I look at it reverse, we're going to want to feel, even if it's very subtle, the widening of the cheek. Cheek is a little wider. Forehead is a little more narrow. We're going to see that over and over again. And you'll see times where the forehead gets very, very broad. If you look at old photographs of Edgar Allan Poe, he's got this massive head. And maybe if we looked at that, the forehead's as wide as the cheeks. It looks wider because he's also balding, so it pulls back and we're getting more of the skull. But not the skull, but just the face from the widest part of the face to a slightly narrower part of the face. We're going to want to find that everywhere. So let's see if we can find that everywhere. So here's a Rembrandt. And what I want you to start doing now is throughout the week, maybe each day for 5 or 10 minutes. I call it with my clients micro practicing. I want you to see if you can feel the forehead discrete from the cheekbones and see how they start to fit together. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do. But if we track this, let's see here. The forehead comes down and bumps in, goes over the eyeball, tracks down that way. It's going to do this. And if we look carefully, let's see here, there we go. If we look carefully, we'll notice that the values always tell us where the change happens, or almost always. The front of the forehead, side of the forehead, cheek, side of the cheek. We could see it'll go around the other side, do the same thing, but in this case it's wrapping around. So we don't get to see that other side. But we're going to find that the forehead is a little narrower than the cheek. And if we look at the shadow shapes or the value changes, we'll see that show up. And a brilliant artist will show that. Look at how it's a little darker here, a little lighter here. And as that cheekbone separates out more strongly from the forehead and the eye socket, it gets lighter yet. See how it got darker here? See how it got lighter here? That light, although it diminishes, tracks right up here. And then it drops off again. So we're going to want to understand that drop off before we put on the eyes or even the eye sockets and certainly the eyebrows and eyelashes. And we're going to want to feel that for everything all the way down through the face and plot that out in a systematic way. That's going to be the safest way to work. And if we look at more dramatic lighting situations, here's another Rembrandt. I love my Rembrandt. We can see that the values, again, will tell the tale. In this case, more dramatically, notice how the front of the cheek, whoops, and that again, the front of the cheek separates from the side of the cheek, and the shadow creates a corner where the front plane meets the side plane. It's a rounded corner, if we were to render it, but it's a corner nonetheless. So we're going to want to look for the values, and we're going to want to use, especially in the beginning, reference, whether it's old or new masters or photo reference or looking in the mirror with our desk lamp shining on us. We want to look at strong light because that's going to help us see the structure. If it's soft light, that structure disappears. And notice that our Rembrandt, our first Rembrandt, was pretty soft light in here. I had to really struggle to call out that subtly darker forehead. It's not very evident, but once I mention it, I think it is probably evident to all of us. But if we get the right lighting, a dramatic, relatively dramatic light source, we will see all that good stuff come through. Let me see where my other images are. So I hope that makes sense. In fact, I'm going to click over and see if it makes sense. Head looks square. Yeah, we want to think of it as square, and I'll show you that in just a bit. Whoever said RC said that. That's a great way to look. Think square. Think like a wood carver. Square it off, and we'll round it off later. So let's play with this idea. And let me just do a quick little pitch here. This stuff's for free. It always will be. But anybody who wants to give us a little bit of love, that would be lovely. And I'm reading my notes because I never do this. I forget to do it if I don't write it down. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, this is actually being streamed through YouTube. The YouTube channel has some good content on there, but fairly anemic. There's not a ton of information there. But as we get up and going in this new year, we plan to put a lot of stuff up there. So if you can throw some likes and loves at that, or just like and follow, I guess, at the YouTube channel to help support that, that would be just lovely. I think Mike will put in the maybe the link for us. But it's I think Steve Huston Draws from Life is the YouTube channel. But go over there and give it a little love. And if you want to get access to a ton of material, you can join the Patreon channel. And there it's $8 a month, $8 a month, which is a lot in some countries, I know. But it's a little for us. So that little bit helps to fund these things. Not necessary, but if you want to help, go ahead and do it. And Jay just asked about that. And that's Patreon. I'll put it in the chat. Patreon.com/draws from life. And we have, I think, about 150 people as members over there. And then Mike just dropped the YouTube. And then I've got the coaching program, which is higher ticket. People who want to work with me one-on-one, work with my group of coaches, work with us every week, have several times where we work together during the week. Then that's something for a few that want to really dive in and make 2023 big move, big growth in your art, really pushing towards a high level of craft, and hopefully, maybe because the course is designed that way, are interested in pushing towards a personal voice and not just a second-hand version of anybody, me included, of course. So there's the pitchings are done. We can get on to the good stuff. So what I want to do is I want to look at each section of the face as it fits with the skull and map it out simply, big simple stuff, and then I can refine that as I go. And I'm going to do it like it's an egg, or I'm going to do it like it's a tube, or I'm going to do it like it's a box. And what I'll do is when I'm looking at the head, or if I'm looking at anything, I'll say, does it look more like a box? Does it look more like a tube? Does it look more like an egg? And I'll go that way. And we can just very crudely then plot things out. And oftentimes the box looks the clunkiest. It's the least characteristic because there's a roundness, bit of roundness going across. But it can be the most valuable too. We'll use it quite a bit because the box will tell us right where a corner is, where light meets shadow. And then we can, it's pretty simple. With a little bit of practice, we can round that off so that it looks more rounded or more rounded that way. And what I'm going to do is didn't want to do that, did I? What I want to do is map out where the features are going to go, have a sense of where the features are going to sit before I do all of that subtle architectural landscaping work. And we do that, I got diverted, but we do that with the LTL. So I'm going to draw the face, and I can do it all sorts of ways, and the shape of the skull. And when I do that, I'm going to think about the skull going back and the face going down. And I'm going to do that down the center part of the hair, if there were one, and the center line of the features, which is pretty easy to see. That's an L. It's an upside down L, but it's an L. And then if I come to that same center line and get a eyebrow or eye line, it could be either one or even both. That's going to be a T. And then if I can get that eyebrow or eye line to move back, which is on the front of the face, to move back to the ear, which is on the side of the face, there's another L. And if I can get those three ideas, I can pretty quickly, with a little bit of practice, this is what we did the last couple days, I can plot out how that very simple, doesn't mean it's easy, it takes some practice, that simple head and face structure, skull and face structure, sits in 3 dimensions. And when I do the LTL, notice that's box logic. I'm thinking of the top and the bottom, or more likely the top and the front, but here's the top and the bottom here. If we get underneath. L, T, L. So if I get a more refined construction, that's going to help. And as I start laying those things in, it becomes more and more clear with more and more practice and more placement of those LTL construction lines where things should go. And so as I get more strategic detail placed, let's see here. I'll make better decisions about each of those bits of detail. Make them simpler or more characteristic or whatever. And then I can refine my understanding. And then if I was thinking ahead, I would do all that very lightly, because then if it was a mistake, it'd be easy to fix. There's the L, there's the T, and you could do it in any order. Wouldn't be LTL, it could be TLL or whatever. But if I lay that in nice and lightly, then if I have to make corrections, I don't have to erase it. I can just darken it. And I could actually render right over it. And this is how I'll lay in a drawing that's going to be a really finished drawing, or lay in a drawing that's going to be, that's on a canvas, going to be a really finished painting. I'll draw it just like this, exactly the same way. Okay, so that's what we're kind of after. So let's look at our features here, placed on the skull. So let me do it on time. Let me check real quick questions. Let me know if any of that is confusing. Yeah, shading plays a big value. We're gonna big role in getting it. So absolutely, RC, and we'll use some of that. It's going to be a great double check for us, and we can do it very realistically, or we can just plug things in, just to separate things. So I'll show you how to do that. Give or take the time we have. I think we'll have enough time. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to think of the face and maybe the skull. I could think of it as an egg shape. Now, especially in the beginning, anything I choose, the ball or egg, the tube or tapering tube cone, any kind of box, and it doesn't have to be a UPS box, it could be or a FedEx box, it could be any kind of wedge, it could be trapezoidal, it could be asymmetrical, it could be all sorts of stuff. So it can be any kind of boxy idea. These are way easier to work with. This is the easiest. It's also in some ways the crudest. So what I'll usually do is if I'm going to use something that's very round, I'll bring a little bit of boxiness to it. Make it a little boxy. So I'm going to make the sides of the face kind of in front of the ears in here. I'm going to make those stiffer, straighter, more like a tube actually, or the sides of a box. And I'll oftentimes taper them a little bit because we're going down usually to this thinner jaw. And then I'll cut off the bottom of the chin. And I'll do all this very light. I'm doing it darker so you can see it. You can see the kind of the evolution of this. I'll make that boxy chin, which is definitely to the box. And then I can't see the L going back. I can't see the L going across, around. But I can see that T. That T is going to be super useful. And I'll do the eyebrow line or the eye line. You could even do both. And then I'll lay it in. And when you start laying in those construction lines, you very quickly, sometimes right away, period, but certainly with practice, very quickly start to see if they're a little or a lot off. And so then I'm just going to make my correction. If I drew nice and light, which I'm not, because I want you to be able to see it on screen and maybe on smartphones, I want to make sure that's fairly horizontal, if that's the orientation. Darn, I missed again. So what I want you to do is keep adjusting at this simple stage until it's right. But what I would prefer you do is not erase it like I've been doing. I prefer you start again. Train your hand, train your eye to do what you want it to do, to see what you want to see. And it doesn't have to be perfect. The head is beautifully symmetrical and asymmetrical at the same time. The left side is a little or a lot different than the right side. My right eye is a little bit of a sleepy eye. So it's a little asymmetrical to the left eye. But feel that in there. And as I said, it helps if we draw it lighter. I'm going to do that by a cheap layer. I'll ghost it back a little bit so I can see that. And then what I'm going to notice is that where the eyebrows arch or end is a really convenient place for separating the forehead. Just simple, generically, is going to separate it. So I'm going to use the eyebrows. Not exactly true, and it's going to vary from person to person. But those eyebrows, before they arch and fall down, or just end as they're doing here, that's a good, convenient place to say this is all front of the head, front of the forehead, and this is a side. Might be a corner side or it might be a deep side. It's a side. And what we'll notice is, and here's where values can really be helpful, because we can map out the structure by assigning values. We'll find that if we could ignore the nose, let's see here. Yeah, there we go. If we can ignore the nose, right about at the eye line, that's kind of the underside of the forehead, like so. And now by using those eyebrows and using the eye line, we've mapped out our first structure, first in no particular order, first structure of the head, where the forehead turns towards the side temple area, going from front to side, where those eyebrows arch. We'll see that transition. And then where the eye line sits, that gives us basically the bottom of the wedge if we ignored the nose. And if we look at a real head, we'll see the same thing happens, where let's blow this up a little bit bigger again. We look at a real head, not every time, but most of the time, we're going to find where the arch of the eyebrow is. It's going to be at or very, very close to our front of the forehead. And then everything else beyond that is the side or corner. We can get more subtle around that. And if we think of it that way, soon we won't be surprised very often to know that the values track that. The darker shadow starts somewhere in there, very, very close. And the medium, it's only slightly darker, halftone sits in there too, very, very close. And then the forehead itself, from that arching eyebrow on, becomes front. And I call that box logic, because no matter how round it is, I'm thinking like a box. And that's going to pay great dividends to me later, as we'll see when we learn how to render this stuff. And if I end up having two values, it's just two planes, dark side and light side. If it's three values, it'd be three planes. There's a little corner plane in there, a little corner between where the front and the side meets. Here we can't see the forehead because the bangs cover it, but we can see where the cheek gets shaded. This is all side plane. It's catching light. This is all front plane. It's catching shadow. Here's my T. Here's my L. Here's my other L. box logic, and the values are going to be great tips for us to find those. So we really want to check those out. So let's go down to our head here and look at it generically. So we're going to see the eyebrow line, and where those eyes arch. Let's make that a little darker here. Where it arches and falls. That's close enough. That's pretty close to where our forehead is. And then it bumps back into the eye socket. And you can see that. I'm up here now. You can see that here. It bumps back into the eye socket and then hits the nose. Bumps back into the eye socket and hits the cheek, I should say. Hits the cheek, or if you can't see the cheek, hits the nose. But you can see that stepping down and back into the socket, and the eyeball and the eyelashes poke out. But it's stepping back in. Stepping back in. And if I do this, and it should really be here, we can adjust that later easily. If I do this, and it should really be down here, we can adjust that easily later. If I do this, and it should be up here. So we can fix this as we go along by redrawing the whole thing again, which is the best way to practice, or just correcting it. And if we draw nice and light, we can get ever darker as we try and correct things to exactly where we want them. But for now, it's just ballpark. And then wherever that arch is, it's going to be there, it's going to be here, it's going to be here. It doesn't matter too much for now. We just wanted ballpark. Wherever that arch is, I'm going to swing back under the hair, unless it's bald, and feel that temple line. And that'll show me how the forehead and eventually the cheek integrates back into the skull. Forehead back into the skull, face into the skull. We always want to think of them separate and then think of them grouping together, grouping in separation. And so we'll see, this is stylized here a little bit, but we'll see a subtle transition back around here. It's a nice way to go. Doesn't have to be there, but it takes it someplace. So this will just go back this way. And if we continued that eyebrow down, which it might do a little or a lot, and notice this arches, and I did not arch it here. I didn't arch it there. I'm just going to shoot for the peak. Let's just simplify, or the valley. Either one of those or both. There we go. Sometimes we'll see the eyebrows not have an arch, then that does us a favor. But it's going to come down here, somewhere in here, and back. And you can see the ghost of that darker tone going up and starting to curl back. We're just going to track that. And notice the tone was here, I did here. Doesn't have to be accurate, just ballpark. Now what we've done is created a whole front to side relationship. Pick it up there. Notice that is not exactly the same as that. It's good enough. If it's not good enough, you could begin again, do it even better. But that's going to give us our front to side. And we're going to tend to see the values hug. We'll have a group of values that maybe they're darker. We'll tend to hug this side and stay pretty contained. And then we might have a group of values that's middle value that hug that front area and stay contained. And then we might have a group of values that are really light that hug that other side. 3 planes, 3 values. And then we've got a bottom plane that's darker yet, or the same value as one of the other planes. And notice how, as we break that down into pieces, and then feel how those pieces blend together, integrate, we can then start to slowly map it, create the architecture. And then, let's see here, what are we doing on time? We're about done. Let's see if I can find my... There we go. If we look at this again now, we're getting this, we're getting this. This is descending down, whether the eyebrows actually do that or not. In this case, they do pretty well. Here, here, anywhere in there, here. Doesn't have to be exactly right. You'll make it more accurate later. Let's make it a little more accurate. Eyebrows fall. That corner is going to be the natural place where the darker halftone or the shadow or somewhere in between, but roughly where it all gets darker to the left as opposed to lighter to the right. And as this descends down, if I just go through the eye line, upper lid, where the lids meet, let this eyebrow structure just continue down, even though the hair of the eyebrow is going to stop. Oops. Let's do this. Notice the eyebrows just stop there. Can drop down anyway. Anywhere in there. You can round it down, or you can round it down. You can make it a little narrower. You can make it a little fatter. You can refine it later. Pick it up there. There it goes back. This is going to be the step down that way. And as this comes out and meets this, notice how it sits pretty close to that highlight or a lighter halftone right there, right there. Right here. That is going to give us the front plane of the cheekbone to side. And notice again how the cheek is lighter at around that construction line we did. And then everything to the left of that is darker again. Everything to the left is darker. Same with the nose, darker. Same with the mouth, darker. Turns to the left in this world, it gets darker. Turns to the right, it gets lighter. Turns down, it gets darker. Turns up, it gets lighter. And we just follow that consistency. So by doing that, now we're showing the cheeks slightly wider. Let's go back to our guy here, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. Comes down. Let's see here. There we go, underneath it. This comes down. That gives us the wider cheeks that way. So real quick. There's the T. Eyebrows, eyebrows, eyeline. This creates the forehead. This creates the forehead, side planes to front planes. This creates the wider cheeks. And then they'll fall down this way towards the chin eventually. Notice how that's it's just this waterfall. It comes out and falls down. Notice how this is all side plane. We'll get to the lower face next week probably. Sits like that. Once we have that, then we'll spend some time, because it'll take some time, to find where to put the eye sockets and the eyeballs. And we'll find that if the left side of the forehead is darker, then the left side of the cheek will have to be darker. And the left side of the eyeball will have to be darker. And the left side of the nose will have to be darker. And so on. And then with some practice, and it takes some practice, we'll be able to map out our structures beautifully. The left side of the eyeball is also darker. Left side of the nose is also darker. Right side of the nose also darker. Right side of the eye also darker. Right side of the forehead. Right side of the cheek. And we'll be able to work this out quite convincingly. Gets a little darker here. Gets a little darker here. Notice I'm thinking like water falls off to the chin. We'll have to figure out how that works later. Chin, as rounded as it is in the finish, is it going in the same boxy direction as the forehead and the eye line and the nostrils and the corners of the mouth. And then all of a sudden we get an understanding of how to mask the values and describe the shapes and plot out front planes from side planes, top planes from bottom planes, corner planes, subtle steps as opposed to titanic moves. And we can get more and more refined. So let's stop there. We went quite a bit long, but it was important stuff. Hope that helps. And if you have a chance, support us on Patreon or YouTube, or ask us about the coaching program. We'll tell you all about it. But more than likely, just have fun. Well, I won't say more than likely, because some of you are actually working with me now. But not necessary. Let's put it that way. Have some fun with this. Think about it. Test it out. Look at some reference in the real world. Or look at great art that inspires you, like I like to do. I like to do both. And see what you can see. And we'll begin again next week and take it a little bit farther. You guys are very, very welcome. You take care of yourselves. I love you all. Anybody who wants to bring a little more beauty into this world is my kind of person. So we will see you next week, I hope.